Well, hello, everyone.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you for
Okay.
having me today.
Oh, pleasure. Well, let me introduce you first. We need to give you a good introduction. So everybody, welcome to the Tashkkeel lecture. Please ask questions and make comments live. You can do this through the chat facility on Zoom. Plus, there will be plenty of time after the lecture as well. And don't forget that this session is being recorded. Now, this week is all about design here in Dubai, the only UNESCO city of design in the Middle East, North Africa region. And we are delighted that today's Tashkkeel lecture is also part of Dubai Design Week 2021. Tashkkeel is really committed to nurturing sustainable design practices. Firstly, UAE-made design, because we are a nation of highly skilled people that have the ability to manufacture and fabricate right here on our own doorstep. Secondly, we support research and development of organic materials from the UAE in contemporary design practice, from desert cotton to raffwood, desert sand to palm fronds. You can see more of this at our stand at Downtown Design this week. And thirdly, as the home of Precious Plastic Dubai, Tashkkeel supports the repurposing, recycling and upcycling of waste material into viable, functional, affordable and exciting designs. So for today's lecture, we are delighted to welcome architect and design researcher, Irene Roca Moracia. Now, Irene experiments with materials and spaces generated by overproduction and the environmental crisis. For the past few years, she has researched how the European construction system works, making use of legal grey zones to obtain materials in perfect condition discarded by construction companies. This has underpinned the production of her recent collection, Appropriating the Grid, which illustrates how sustainability is a matter of operations and behaviours, not merely a matter of architectural design and technology. Irene's recent work for LVMH came from the idea of creating a regenerative material that could target a problematic existing one, concrete, while also generating a bigger impact. So that is how the question came to life. That is the title of today's Tashkkeel live lecture. How can invasive species be used to create luxurious materials whilst improving our local biodiversity? Irene, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a really good introduction. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a bit more of my background before that, so everyone can understand why I'm doing what I'm doing right now and why I'm working around sustainability and regenerative design. I hope I came to this point. So as I was saying, I'm an architect and a designer, and I started architecture school in 2009 in Alicante in Spain. And we need to understand that in 2008, the financial crisis exploded. And I went to an area of Spain that find itself full of landscapes like this one, of unfinished construction spaces, of unfinished buildings. And I did my whole architecture school visiting those spaces and having a lot of discussion of what we could do with those spaces. So decided to call them contemporary ruins. And it was a change in mentality in the university that something was wrong with the way we were producing architecture to that point and the way we were consuming architecture, and that somehow the bubble had exploded and we need to change the way we were doing things and we need to rethink our profession. So for the past few years, I have been looking at how to reintegrate or reactivate abandoned and empty structures in Europe before coming to London to do a master research around this situation and how really we arrived to this landscape of unfinished spaces. So what is a contemporary ruin? A contemporary ruin is an unfinished contemporary structure that of a building that was never sold and came to life under the concept of ruin. And they appear everywhere for around about 5 years after the financial crisis. And they're honestly just the peak of the iceberg of an overproduction crisis. So I focus my research on understanding those spaces, but also trying to have a positive view towards them, because I mean, we have produced all those structures, we have polluted to produce all those structures, and we cannot demolish them anymore because it's extremely expensive to do so. So we need to integrate them into our lives. We need to take structures, appropriate them, and somehow bring them into life. So I started looking at what other people were doing. And in 2016, the Spanish pavilion in the Venice Biennale won the Golden Lion, and it was called Unfinished. And the whole exhibition was around those spaces. And there was an optimistic view toward those spaces. They showcased so many examples of from small appropriation things to bigger ones, where people were starting to say, well, we have those structure here, now we need to do something with them. But sadly, when I started researching, I realized that in Europe, we still had a really static situation toward those spaces. We are not doing much because most of the regulations are not really allowing us to do much. So I started to think like there must be another way of doing things. And I positioned my research towards looking at other current or recent examples of those situations around the world. When this happened, I realized that in Latin America, we had a similar situation in the 80s and in the 90s. And what was the most shocking thing when I found this is that those spaces are not static. They are full of life because people are using them. People are they haven't say, oh no, we cannot use the spaces because they don't fulfill security or regulations. No, they are here. Let's use them. So I focus my research on understanding this main example, which is Torre David in Caracas. And this was a bank, a financial tower in the main district, the financial district of Caracas, that after one of the financial crises at the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, got stopped. And for 14 years, it has been occupied by people. People have been living here for 14 years, and they have created a society and a sense of a city inside this structure. And they have succeeded to build their own spaces into this tower. So, but little by little, and by themselves mostly, they have built this structure, and they have been filling in areas of this structure. And the most surprising thing of this whole thing is that when you look at what they have achieved after 14 years, is that many of the people that came to live into this tower came from really low income backgrounds. And somehow the tower has helped them, this structure has helped them to achieve a better level in life, achieve spaces and dwellings that they couldn't have afford to buy in the first place because they didn't have the money, but because they have been building it little by little, they have achieved this. And the structure, the tower, has been the main element into generating this situation. So I started to question, like, why can we not do that here? Why cannot we do the same thing in Europe? Why cannot learn from this tower or from the research that Urban Think Tank did about this tower? And that's when I realized that it's almost impossible to do something like this here, mostly because, as I say, regulations are extremely rigid and they don't allow us to have any kind of experimentation into those kind of spaces, because they prioritize security towards doing something with this. And so this was my whole question when I started the collection that I'm going to show now. And I realized also that at the same time in Europe, we were producing extremely finished spaces where nothing was led to change. And during the pandemic, I started to question people how they felt about those unfinished spaces they just bought here in Europe. And to my surprise, 40% of the people state that those spaces, they didn't adapt to their needs, but they didn't have any money left to change them because they have put everything into buying those spaces. So this was just shocking. I started saying, like, who are we building for? Like, are we considering the user in the spaces we are producing, or are we just following all the rules that construction in our countries are forcing us to follow? You know, are we really building for the person who is going to inhabit this? And also the fact that we are building a space that then it needs to demolish in terms of material consumption is just insane. We are producing something and then we are going to demolish this and change it again just because, as an architect, I didn't anticipate what the person needed to do. So I'm over consuming materials. And we are talking about extremely polluting materials. So around this question, I saying, who are we building for? And I need to understand the whole chain of production in architecture. So I started looking at from the production to the material to the delivery of the object itself to the delivery of the building. How are we really building in designing in Europe or in developed countries? And I realized that, well, asking all those questions and seeing also that the 30% of the pollution in the European countries is only caused by the construction industry, I say that there's a problem here in the way we produce the materials, but also in the way we deliver the material itself. And I started going to different suppliers, to different material producers, and analyzing the way they were, the chain was working. And I realized that, again, because of the way we regulate things in the European Union, in every step of the change, we overproduce materials because following those security and quality measures, we need to discharge something every time it gets compromised. So I'm talking that every time a material gets compromised, a brick gets broken, a package of sand, a package of cement gets opened, no longer follow the regulations. So we classify it as construction waste and we have to discharge it. And only people with a license can use this waste, but no one has a license because no one has the interest into putting money to bring those materials back into the change. You will invest more money than what you are going to get at the end by selling them, because to produce those materials is also really cheap. So it's extremely sad. We are discarding materials that are extremely polluting and are costing us money, and they are costing so many other situations. And we are just dumping them into the countryside. So the whole goal of this collection was to say, listen, I think I need to pass this message to the public. So I'm going to create a small exercise where I will build a furniture collection under the same idea that people were building their spaces in Torre David, but with just a really small amount of materials that I can find in less than a week in a small supplier here in London, because I'm talking about tons per week in London. So as I say, those materials, they no longer follow any European construction product regulation. And this is something that is really tricky, and I kind of challenge to question in all the work I'm doing. I will explain this later again with the collection for LVMH, is how we regulate things. Sometimes it's a double sword, because we have, on one side, we have the European Union saying, we are going to develop all those programs around sustainability in construction. Now they have the new European Bauhaus, but then you say, you just need to change rules. If you change how the way you are classifying things and you allow some flexibility for those materials to be used in other areas that are not construction, you can do much more in a certain or a short period of time than just investing money into technology, into creating new materials and new ways of construction. So that's why the sentence about sustainability is not only a matter of it's a matter of operations and behaviors, not only a matter of architectural design and technology. Sometimes we don't realize that by changing so small things or some rules, we can create a really big impact in the short time. But meanwhile, we keep waiting and hoping for something to come that is going to somehow save us from this climate crisis. So as I say, 30% of the waste generated in European Union comes from the construction sector. This is huge. People tend to focus on food or fashion, but actually this is huge and is mainly produced by one material itself. It's concrete, because to produce cement we have to pollute so much that it's just insane. We need to change the way we are building. So there are now a lot of projects around constructing with timber and other series of material, but sadly we are never going to be able to eradicate concrete because the material itself has a quality that we cannot achieve with anything else. So coming back to the collection, I wanted to create something that was a message, that was a statement, where people could see the materials, but also could see the possibility and the transformation of those materials. I could say, we need to be less rigid. We need to allow flexibility for those materials. There can be many other things that maybe you cannot build a dwelling with it. You cannot reintegrate it into the construction industry, but certainly we can do many other things. So the collection is a series of 11 modular elements that we can combine to create our own furniture pieces. And it all has been made with discharged bricks, cement, sands, metal mesh that has been welded and patinated by hand. Everything has been done by hand by myself, because it was also part of this message of saying, if I'm able to do this, and this is my personal exercise, any other person could do a different thing. So as I say, the bricks were smashed and they were used as aggregate, but they were also the pigments. So all the colors you will see into those pieces, they came naturally through the process of mixing them. So I can see I have different tones. They all come from London bricks. So I cannot really control how it's going to look at the end. But we have those, I think, those nice colors that they look natural because they all come from signs of the city that we have seen around. So the 11 modular elements, they combine and you can create your furniture pieces, and they come from this spirit of how people in this tower in Caracas were building their own spaces. They were appropriating the grid of this tower, and they were somehow consuming in a much better and sustainable way than Europe, because they consume only what they needed and they produce only what they needed. So they didn't build a whole house to change it later. They decided what they needed, and they were building the walls, building the kitchen only when they needed it and how they needed it. So I think we need to learn to build in a different way, build with less, and build with our client and with the person that is going to inhabit those spaces, because he's the one who is going to consume those spaces. And sometimes in architecture, we're extremely separated for the final use of the building. We tend to think we know best, but we don't. I mean, and I think there has to be this kind of relationship that is much closer in design, I think, because the scale is different. By architecture, we spent 5 years to produce a building, sometimes, and it changed so much. But sometimes we are really detached from the user. So yeah, the whole project was a critique of the way of producing and consuming architecture in European countries from the point of view and social equality. Because sadly, in the European Union, we have a huge crisis of a residential crisis. There are so many people that cannot buy a house. They cannot rent a house because the prices have exploded and they cannot invest into buying them. And it's getting bigger and bigger, this percentage. But at the same time, we are delivering spaces so finished that they are so expensive. So it was looking at other areas of the world, see what they did with those crises and how they use those crises in a positive way. And I think we need to learn from them. And we need to probably be more flexible and start building differently. And then, well, this is the final collection. And this is how I got to work with LVMH and build the relationship I have now, the partnership, because this project was awarded by the LVMH Green Trade Award. And after that, I started working for them as a consultant. And that's how Collection en Route, which is the collection that has the bioconcrete that has been generated with the byproducts to invasive species, came to life. But I thought I needed to give a bit of background because it's really by the other research that I came to work in this area. So we received a really open brief from LVMH when we started working on this. They wanted a sustainable material for their luxury stores, and they wanted something innovative and new, but not only in the concept, also in the feeling. They wanted something that was beautiful, and they was far from this preconceived idea that sustainability is a mix of materials, of waste, or just a mix of things that doesn't look nice, that it cannot look beautiful or luxurious. So we started this project in the summer of 2020, me and my other colleague Brigitte. And the first week that we started looking at what could we do, or so, Brigitte came with a story. She just came back from Greece from holidays, and she started telling me that she has been there having some scuba diving, and she saw this fish, the lionfish, and she say, "Oh, this is magnificent fish. I thought I will never see. I have read so much about this when I was a child." And we started Google the fish, and really soon we realized that this magical fish had passed from that magical to crazy. I mean, this fish is has so overpopulated in the Mediterranean area that it's destroying the biodiversity of the whole area. So we were so shocked because we didn't know anything about this. We knew about invasive species, but we didn't really think that it was such a big thing. And we really started looking at the different problems that those species cause. And because we are located here in London, we started looking at this problem locally here. And we realized as soon as we started looking that it was just massive. The UK spent over 2 billion annually to remove invasive species. And about 1.8 billion of this goes to one species, which is the Japanese knotweed, which is a plant, and it's all over Europe. So when we wanted also to focus on this, because most of people tend to think that the biggest problems are others like climate change, loss of habitat, but invasive species is there with them. It's one of the 3 biggest dangers to our planet right now. So the Japanese knotweed was introduced in at the beginning of the 19th century as an ornament plant. It was brought from the South and East Asia, and it was really trendy for many years in botanical gardens and in Victorian gardens. But as everything, it went out of fashion and into the wild, and that's the problem. So here we can see the spread of this plant from the beginning of the 19th century to the 2020. It has just taken over the whole country, and it's becoming a real issue because nowadays the Japanese knotweed is known to have a negative impact on local biodiversity, flood risk, and ecosystem services. Significant risk to the structural integrity of construction, with the ability to grow through walls, tarmac, and concrete. It can wreck roads and buildings. It is capable of devaluating property completely if it's found in the plot. It is regarded as a pest in many parts of the country because of its quick spread, which allows it to dominate habitats because it doesn't have any predator in the UK. It doesn't have any natural enemies. And it has grown uncontrollably around the whole country. And the other main species we wanted to focus is the American cyanide crayfish. So in 1970, a crayfish love in Sweden started to have a big problem because there was a crayfish pest running around the country, which was killing most of the local crayfish. So countries like Sweden or UK started importing the American cyanide crayfish because this it was thought that this crayfish could have this pest, and they started bringing them and producing it to feed the Swedish consumer. But what happened is that with time, many other countries had done the same, and they have lowered the price so much that the business was not really interesting here in the UK anymore. And what happened is that most of these crayfish ran wild around the country. So now we have a crayfish that can eat the local one, but also is a carrier of the pest, something that they didn't know in the 1970s, but now is completely destroying the local crayfish. The industries that they have grown around those species are controlling them in two different methods. One is manual. They are just fishing or trapping the crayfish, or cutting and drying the plant. And the other one is chemical. But the problem with the chemical one is that you risk to contaminate in many other things. For example, in the crayfish, it will get into the food chain, and we will finally eat this chemical. So right now, here in the UK and in most of Europe, the kind of control we are doing is just manual. And yeah, it's just manual. And we also wanted to focus on the industries that control those species manually, because we didn't want to have a product that would have been modified or had any chemical in. So for example, for the plant, the industries we are working with, they just cut it and let it dry, or they cut it and burn it. And we are using the Japanese knotweed ash as one of our ingredients. So we started looking at, after kind of localize the problem and localize the idea we wanted to work with, we say, so what can we create with the byproduct generated by the removal of invasive species? And we tested many different methods. And after a while, we say, let's focus really into targeting one of the worst construction materials, or the most polluting construction materials. And I have been always really fascinated by how Roman or Greek or any kind of ancient structure is still standing. And the things like Romans, they were already building with concrete. They were already using mortars and using concrete, really similar to the ones we are using right now. So how is possible that their structures are still standing, that they are still under the Mediterranean Sea, and they look almost perfect? Well, we are not able to build something like that right now. We don't have the technology. Our concrete cannot stay under seawater. It will be destroyed. So I started questioning all those things, and I have been really interested into the recipes, Roman recipes, and what they use. And what is fascinating is that they understood really well how to use their local ingredients. So most of the Roman concretes are based on a volcanic ash binder. It means that they understood that with volcanic ash, they could bind different aggregates and produce their mortars. And this material will have the same kind of reaction, is going to cure in the same way that our concrete does. But sometimes they couldn't find this volcanic ash. So they look at wood ash instead, and they use this as binder. So that's how we link together the byproducts of the plant, this wood ash that stays after the burning of the plant, with our production. And that's what we use as binder. And that's what we had been testing, and we are still testing, because this project is still in the earlier stages. We still need to standardize the recipes, and we have made many variations of the recipes. So we use that plus the crayfish shells as aggregate to create our materials. and they all have this raw texture, the really natural texture, because they come from two natural ingredients. All the pigments come naturally, and which was one of the biggest surprise, and I think the most beautiful of the whole project, is that when we started mixing the Japanese knotweed, and the reaction that it produced with the water, it was this burgundy color. So we were achieving this burgundy color just by the reaction of the material. And I mean, this is the essence of luxury, I think. Something that you cannot produce in any other way. It just comes naturally from a plant. It does this really, really good color, and it has this raw and natural texture. So we have created a series of tiles. The collection is composed by 6 tiles, and they have really different colors, from a burgundy to pink to minty, and we have created different textures with them. And this is what we are trying to introduce now in the luxury stuff of LVMH, or that's what we are still talking with the designers and things like that. And but we are really happy in the sense that we see so much potential into this design, because what we call regenerative design is something that can work with nature and can create a bigger impact into balancing the sustainability. So this potential has, this project has huge potential, huge regenerative design, because it can bring value into the industries around controlling these invasive species, and can help to balance our local biodiversity again. So it's not a project that is meant to be scalable in the sense that you could produce this same thing elsewhere, because it's meant to be local, and that's the way we are kind of working or targeting those problems. But the idea behind can be implied in a different project. You can look at local problems, local species that are targeting local ones, that are targeting the local biodiversity, and try to introduce those things into the production of the material, of a collection, of a design. And that's regenerative design, because you will be flipping the mark. You are not aiming from 0. You are aiming from minus. You are aiming for something that it will be producing a bigger impact in the future, and it can set to produce a long-term effect if it can't help to control those species here in the UK. So as I say, this is the main goal of the project, is to incentivize further removal of invasive species, thus leading to restoring our local biodiversity. And yeah, this project was created for LVMH. We are still developing this with them in partnership with Maison Zero, which is their maison in Central Martins, where I did my research, my previous research, and how I connected with them. And that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic, Irene. Thank you very much. As we wait for our comments and questions to come in from our audience, can I ask, obviously you have to source the Japanese knotweed, you have to source the invasive species of crayfish. Is it easy to get your hands on this resource?
It's not easy, and this comes to the previous thing I say, because as soon as this gets collected, or it gets classified as invasive waste, so it's the same kind of thing that with the construction waste. Only people with a license can really make use of this. So it's again interrogating all those kind of absurdities in the way we regulate things, at least here in the European Union, where everything is regulated. So because they are not flexible, and we talk with many experts. We talk with people who are studying the plant in Cambridge, and they tell us we have so many problems to get the plant, because, and they are studying it. They have been studying it for the past 30 years, but because it's classified in this way, it's just so complicated. And with the crayfish, it's also really tricky. We talk with one of the biggest controllers here in the UK who does everything manually. And we went with him to the field and everything. And he explained to us that before he was using them to feed, he was selling them to restaurants. But since a new law passed 2 years ago, he's no longer allowed to do that. So he just sells them to the zoo. But we are importing crayfish from China. We're importing crayfish from other places, which is just is insane. So it's all looking at the way sometimes politics don't look at, you know, what they are causing with some of the rules that they are creating, or they don't really ask because I mean, if you pass a law, you should talk with the experts that they are really going to be affected by the law, and no one was really approached before those kind of roles. And the professor that studied the plan in Cambridge, he told us that he has talked about many politicians and things that don't get better. So it has been really tricky. Most of them, they came to, again, with verbal agreements, the same way that the materials for my other construction. And at the end, it's just because people understand what you're trying to communicate. So they agree with you, and they see a bigger goal, and they let you collect those things. But it's quite tricky. It's really tricky.
The value of trust, I think.
Yeah.
In moving forward, but when you say, you know, we are literally wrapping ourselves up in bureaucracy, and when we say we are destroying the planet, we literally are, by restricting research like this. Majda Khumji asks, what were the difficulties you had in finding these research results, or was it available information?
About the plant, or which one?
I think about talking about Japanese knotweed and crayfish. You know, what research was there that pointed you in this direction in the first place?
Oh, I called many people. I sent many emails. Yeah, I mean, I came from a position where I didn't know anything about this plant. I started talking to experts in the public parks, understanding what the plant was really causing, what the public parks were doing about this. Then we started talking with researchers that had been studying the plant to understand a bit the properties of the plant, and then really took into the industry. But it was emails and calls, and it was this trust chain at the end, because yeah, there's not much online or anywhere about this, because I think it's complicated to use it. So yeah,
real detective work. That you should add that to your CV. Designer detective. A question about the future. Obviously, you know, you're extremely excited, and you've got people excited about this, but is there potential to get a funder on board to help you move this forward?
So right now we are developing this with Maison Zero, which is a partnership between Central St. Martin's and LVMH. Because we developed this project for LVMH, so we are consultants, and we are the creative directors behind this product or this project. But it's their material, and the aim is to bring this material into their world, into their stores. So right now, I don't think we are going to have any external funding, but yeah, we are still using the Central Martins, and we are now testing things and really moving forward, because we need to understand exactly what we can achieve with this material.
Absolutely fantastic. Pigmentation. I loved how you mentioned, you know, the uniqueness of the pigmentation discovery. And I have to say, when you were talking about the Romans as well, it reminds me of the murex snail, which was used by the Romans to create Tyrian purple, originating from Lebanon, I have to say, not far from where we are in Dubai. But I think, you made a very important point there. We need to learn from our past in
Yes.
order to inform our future. And I think here in the UAE, that rings very true as well. We've been looking at arish, palm tree wood, as well as desert cotton and so forth. And it's very much looking back and seeing how the original Bedouin tribesmen here in the UAE used to use the natural resources here, and then making it fit for purpose in contemporary design practice. That's really important. You mentioned Central St. Martin's quite a few times, and I know that several people here in the UAE that are now leading successful design careers studied at Central St. Martin's. What is it about Central St. Martin's that brings out people like you, that generates this curiosity?
For me, I think it was the opportunity to do a research project, but not going into a PhD, but doing something in 2 years. And also the idea of having this big research, but also the production of the collection, because we need it, we need to create a collection with our research. So I think it was this really nice mix between producing and doing everything by ourselves, and the facilities are crazy. Like the workshops are really, really good. And also having this research, quite deep research, because it's 2 years, about a subject that I was fascinated by and I really wanted to look into. So yeah, and for me it was freedom also, because architecture school is quite, I don't know how to say it, but it's really intense too.
Prescriptive, very structured.
Exactly. So I think for me it was freedom, because they questioned me, my teachers, they questioned me, the technician questioned me, but there was this kind of idea that they also trusted me, because they kept saying that you look so convinced, that we'd say, yes, go and do it. So it was for me, it was really liberating, coming from an architecture background into this institution. Yes.
And talking about the scale of your work and how you can transform it into a mass market commodity, either for your appropriating the grid collection, or for this collection you're working with LVMH on. That's our biggest challenge, I think, here in the UAE, is once we discover the suitability of a material, a natural material, how can we then transform it from handmade, limited edition, and get it into mass market to fulfill the ultimate goal, which is re-educating society, changing consumer behavior. Do you think in your situation you will ever realize your vision?
Well, I think it's complicated. The first project was more about passing a message and creating something that was impacting visually, so people would say, oh, because most of the people were saying like, this is a lot of material, and say, just with this less than a week in a really small place. And it has been it was here in the Design Biennale. So I think the goal of this project is a bit different. Like the audience is not, the idea is not really to sell this as something that you would repeat, but it's kind of our whole collection, and that's how it's being presented. And then the second one, yes, we are aiming for a standardization, but also we don't want to create an industry around this. And this was really important since the beginning, because we don't want people to have more crayfish or have more Japanese knotweed. We don't want to create an industry around this. What we want is to integrate the one that is already existing, and without creating a material with something that is already there. So right now, yes, the goal is to standardize the product, and I think it's something that is quite realistic, but we need time, of course, and because it's natural and it's new, we need to observe how the material behaves. But yes, I think it's a lot of those projects are around communication, and the most important bit is that the client or the public understands the shipment in the industry, and also the understands that sometimes products are more than what you just see, and they need to question also where those products coming from. because they are consuming them, so they are part of this change. They are part of the problem. And that's also the goal in my first project, was the idea of a small changement. If it's a bureaucratic changement, if it's a changement in the consumption of something, can make a bigger impact. So if we all change the way we consume it, we start saying, I'm not going to buy this because I know where it's coming from, and I don't agree with where it's coming from, but I want something that is helping my planet, or is something that is going to create a bigger impact. And that's the most important part, I think. So probably many products can be standardized and can be mass produced under those ideas, but others no. And we are at the very beginning of some of them. So I think it will come with time, and it will come also in educating. And I hate to say this because, I mean, who am I to educate anyone? But educating the consumer, educating the public into questioning where things are coming from. And I think that's really important.
From my personal perspective, I think, you know, the pandemic that we have just come out of, not only, you know, had a huge effect on social interaction and the way we think about things as individuals and as society and communities. But here in the UAE, there is a dramatic increase in general awareness around sustainability issues. And I think because we are a country, the wider UAE, we are a country that imports so much. And during COVID, certain items were not available as much, and they continue not to be, because delivery chains have tightened. And I think that issue of sustainability, of utilizing our natural resources here, are stronger than ever. But as you say, it takes time to develop that research. And when consumer design demand is very high, you want to work hard to meet that consumer demand and catch the wave of awareness that's happening now. But we wish you all the very best, and
thank you
very good luck to you. Please keep in touch, and when you are passing through Dubai next time, stop off, and we'd be delighted to meet you and learn more about your practice.
I will. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much. For everyone on the chat, if you scroll up, you'll see Irene's Instagram address and also her website. I've been posting some links to some of the things she's been talking about as well.
Yep.
And thank you very much indeed. This issue of sustainability continues with Tashkkeel next month, 7th of December. Jonathan Ashmore, the UAE-based architect and designer, the guy that built Al Faya Retreat in Sharjah, will be talking about sustainable architectural practice. And if you are around in Dubai this week, please visit us at stand E21 at Downtown Design, where you can see for the first time in the UAE plant leather made here, upholstery stuffing from desert cotton, and also composite arish for new furniture design. So from all of us from Tashkkeel, and thank you to Irene, thank you and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.